Did Russia really swing the U.S. elections? Probably not is the short answer, and at France 24, we don't peddle in conspiracy theories. But the final result in favor of Donald Trump was tight enough for us to be asking our panel about reports by the New York Times and NBC that point the finger directly at Vladimir Putin over the hacking of emails during the campaign. What is the motivation if it is proved true? More broadly, the internet was touted as this gateway to a more transparent society. Has it instead become a tool for undermining democracy? The head of Germany's domestic intelligence certainly thinks so. He's worried about elections there next year. Same say French authorities ahead of a presidential poll where frontrunners from the center-right, far-right, and far-left all express a penchant for Putin. A more transparent society, a more vulnerable society. Just look at Yahoo's admission, second of its kind, that its email users may have been hacked, with the culprits allegedly in, yes, Russia. For public figures, for private citizens, is the way we use the internet due for a rethink? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking what the heck? With us from Seattle, former U.S. intelligence operator Navid Jamali, author of How to Catch a Russian Spy. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Raf Harfouche is with digital strategists and think tank Red Thread. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And you're also the author of Yes, We Did, an insider's look at social media, how social media built the Obama brand. He blogs as Euromaestro, Jean-Pierre Larochelle, director of the Political Forum. Thank you. Nice to see you. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. For the New York Times, there is no doubt it's running with a story entitled How Russian Cyber Power Invaded the U.S. The story chronicles how hackers accessed the Democratic Party's emails, most notably thanks to what are known as phishing emails, where cyber criminals convinced, for instance, a Clinton aide to change passwords using their bogus Gmail security page. The story quotes unnamed U.S. intelligence sources that claim only Putin could have ordered this, a claim that's also being leveled by NBC News, which quotes a statement that reads, only Russia's senior-most officials could have authorized these activities. That was an intelligence judgment based on an understanding of the Russian system of government, which Putin controls with absolute authority. Last Sunday, speaking of Fox News, well, the president-elect of the United States thought otherwise.
There's great confusion. Nobody really knows. And hacking is very interesting. Once they hack, if you don't catch them in the act, you're not going to catch them. They have no idea if it's Russia or China or somebody. It could be somebody sitting in a bed someplace.
Navid Jamali, are you convinced by Mr. Trump?
No. I think that this was clearly a Russian operation, as I call it, information warfare operation. And it's important to also understand, François, what we're talking about the Russians did. The Russians did not change the numerical vote. They were not in the voting booth with Americans. And certainly they did not make the media disproportionately cover WikiLeaks. But what they did do is, as you pointed out, is collect intelligence, collect information, and then use WikiLeaks to launder it and release it, which was then covered by the media. So I disagree respectfully with Mr. Trump. I think that there is evidence that the Russians were behind exfilling data from, Mr. Podesta and other Democratic members. So I frankly disagree with him on that.
Navid, the problem we have is in all the stories we're seeing the last 24 hours, it's always unnamed sources. So tell us what you think is the smoking gun here.
I'm sure, again, and I'm sure you have a good panel here that can talk about the technology, but again, from a cyber perspective, when you come to an intelligence operation, Francois, there are two components. First is you don't want to get caught. But the second one is if you do, you want it to be non-attributable. That is to say that if you are caught, you don't want your country to be named as the one behind it. And generally, cyber operations fall under that premise as well. That being said, there's always going to be some level of footprints. And whether it's on the cyber end or whether, as I'm guessing the CIA has, are sources. There are people that were involved. As you're hearing, Mr. Putin himself was probably the one who authorized this, that there is going to be a trail, there's going to be communication, there are going to be people talking about it. So I'm sure that there are alternative methods. that the intelligence agencies have to see who was behind it and what they were after.
All right. By the way, we invited WikiLeaks to join our conversation, unsuccessful in getting them to do so. Raf Harfouch, your thoughts? Navid, basically, they're bluntly saying that WikiLeaks is complicit.
I definitely agree. I think that WikiLeaks has been providing all of this information. I mean, the interesting thing is that the Russian hacking that happened was a big part of it, but it wasn't the only part of what I think played a big part of what happened in this election cycle. I think other things to consider is the spread of misinformation from a variety of other sources, interested communities, individuals, in addition to politically motivated people who gain a lot of benefit from spreading misinformation. There has been the emergence of an actual business model, a new market, specifically around people who frankly don't care very much about Mr. Trump or his politics or Hillary Clinton and her politics and simply want to benefit from the clicks and generating revenue. So I think part of the reason why this is such a complicated issue to wrap our heads around is that we're not just dealing with one clearly defined agendas, but a blending of agendas and motivations and people from all over the world who are sort of meddling in this new global narrative around politics. All
right, lots of different actors meddling. In the case, though, of these emails inside the Democratic National Party, could it have been, some high school geek in his garage, or is it, or does it? Do you agree that it has to come from the top in Moscow?
No, I definitely agree. In addition, some of the latest developments that have happened with WikiLeaks, especially with the new leaking of German intelligence documents, over 90 gigabytes of documents that were just leaked recently ahead of the German elections next year. And German intelligence analysts have also said that this is coming from the same group that leaked the DNC emails. So I think you're starting to see something which is a very sophisticated, politically motivated cyber attack.
All right, the U.S. president, speaking to satirical program The Daily Show earlier this week, he lays part of the blame at Trump's doorstep and most of it at Russia's.
This was not a secret running up to the election. The president-elect, in some of his political events, specifically said to the Russians, hack Hillary's emails, so that we can finally find out what's going on and confirm our conspiracy theories.
Jean-Pierre La Rochelle, you agree with President Obama that it is, fishy, to say the least, that here was the leaking of the emails from one side and not the other?
I think that the whole discussion is framed not correctly. It's a little bit analogous to blaming Woodward and Bernstein for the Nixon Watergate scandal. There is a serious issue involving security and intelligence and preventing Russia from interfering with our elections and needs to be looked into. But that's separate from saying that the fact that criminal activity, public corruption, and other serious issues that may have affected the voter outcome being revealed by Russia is Russia's fault. Russia's not the source of the information. It's the underlying information that was damaging to the Clinton campaign. So I think there's two separate issues.
You say Russia's not the source. However, in that New York Times report, they talk about, most notably, this group or this person, we don't know if it's a person or a group, called Guccifer. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. 2.0, which clearly seems to be coming out of Russia, although in conversation journalists had with one of the people that claimed to be behind it, said he was Romanian, but it didn't.
No, my point is ultimately Russia may be the source of the leaks and be the actor that leaked the information or provided the information to WikiLeaks either directly or indirectly. My point is the reason why there was damage is because of the underlying information that was on the DNC server or was on Podesta's emails. They were involved in criminal activity that was exposed by Russia. The damage is caused by the criminal activity, not by the fact that Russia provided that information, and that's where the focus should be.
Barack Obama's point is that there's a selective uncovering of corrupt activity.
Absolutely, because if we believe the CIA assessment, which has not been agreed to yet by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, they believe now, for the first time since Friday, they've been saying it's because the Russians were interested in the Trump election, Trump victory in this election. Previously, they were saying they were just interested in undermining the confidence in the election. So if that's true, obviously it would be one-sided. We know that the RNC was also hacked, but there weren't corresponding leaks.
Weren't corresponding leaks. You say it was to help Donald Trump get elected.
Well, the CIA says that.
The CIA says that. But Vladimir Putin's a winner either way, isn't he? Because he has either a Donald Trump who's elected, but elected under this cloud of uncertainty now.
Exactly. I mean, it's clear, as the original assessments were saying, that part of the goal would have been to undermine confidence and the legitimacy of the election. We have previous statements by the Russian government saying that the U.S. election now is a farce. And so that was clearly one of the goals, and they were somewhat successful in that. And as you pointed out, even if Hillary had managed to win the election, she would have been potentially compromised by the information that was leaked.
Naveed Jamali, is this unprecedented, what we're witnessing?
Absolutely. And again, just to take issue a little bit with what your other panelists just said, this wasn't leaked information. That's a very important distinction. And I mean, frankly, this goes back to Snowden. This was not leaked information. This was stolen information done through espionage. And that is not the same thing as a whistleblower, which is what WikiLeaks purportedly claims to be. It's a very important distinction that, WikiLeaks is a house for whistleblowers for the common good. And I think that unprecedented, absolutely. But there's this myth that we have to move past, that that WikiLeaks is somehow this bastion for good, when in fact it's been proven that these were emails that were stolen and were then laundered to WikiLeaks with a specific, whether it was to elect Donald Trump or not is relatively insignificant. Frankly, it was done so to meddle with the U.S. election. And WikiLeaks, and frankly, as much as the media was complicit in this activity. So yes, unprecedented, absolutely.
Raf Harfouch?
I'm kind of in the middle. I do agree with your point about the fact that it was the source, it was the content of the emails that caused a lot of problems specifically for the Democratic Party. But let's also not forget that the hacking and leaking or the dumping of information wasn't the only thing that they are accused of doing. They're also accused of using a vast network of chatbots to purposely spread hundreds of thousands of articles. They are accused of sending some of their own sort of individual actors and threatening journalists and doxing them, releasing their private information online. They're accused of a whole variety of
activities. Is that corroborated?
Yes, these were some of the same security briefings that were sort of sent out about some of these attacks. And this is, I think, is part of a much bigger picture of how people can influence political process, right? It's not just the revealing of information. It's the use of sophisticated technologies in order to kind of take advantage of the narrative and to sort of play off of the chaos to create more uncertainty.
On the hashtag F24Debate, viewers saying to us, well, this is just part of an information warfare that's existed a long time, and the U.S. does it sometimes, the Russians do it sometimes. Why is this different this time?
I mean, in my opinion, I think one of the most interesting things is we are seeing the rise of sort of a global digital culture where the fights that are happening, which, elections have always sort of maybe been a bit complicated and a bit aggressive at times. But what we're seeing, which I find very troubling, is the emergence of almost a unified movement of people from all over the world with different agendas that are focusing on foreign governments and foreign elections. So, for example, in all of the forums that I research, all the online communities that were pro-Trump, much of the dialogue now has shifted to the French elections next year. So we're starting to witness the emergence of almost this global agenda from these certain types of communities where they're able to cross borders in order to mobilize around very specific causes.
Who's behind these communities? Who's attracted to them?
I mean, I think nobody really knows 100% for sure. That's part of the downside of the anonymity of the web. I would hypothesize that I think the Russians have a strong presence in supporting these types of communities, but it's also...
When you say communities, just explain for our viewers.
Like, for example, different sub-communities on forums like Reddit, different 4chan. They're message boards where hundreds of thousands of people can gather and exchange information. And what we're starting to see is that there is a very sort of worldview that is being pushed. There's a graphic that's being pushed around that has Marine Le Pen's face on it and Donald Trump and Putin. And so there's almost this like emergence of a global force, whereas traditionally we saw a lot of these populist governments as being very isolationist.
Now, I mean, there's a dose of skepticism when I'm listening to you because, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, what you're describing, that there's some meeting somewhere every Tuesday and and they decide what they're going to put out on these communities.
It's not a conspiracy theory at all, as much as it's just the removal of boundaries. Technology as an access point has just allowed people from all walks of life, from all political views, to connect with each other across villages, across oceans. So I'm not saying that there's a secret society that is out there trying to, manipulate events. What I'm saying is that this technology platforms have enabled people to mobilize together around very specific causes, be they political or social, in a way that's unprecedented before, in a way that allows them to sort of expand their worldview and connect to each other.
Jean-Pierre Larochelle, in 2011, we hailed the leaderless revolutions in the Arab Spring. Is this another form of a leaderless revolution, but of a different kind?
Yeah, I think it points to even a much bigger problem, which we haven't really discussed, which is the use of cyber warfare and cyber attacks by state actors, and that's what we're seeing here. And we saw this in 2000.
So wait, just to answer what Rahaf was saying, have you seen these, first of all, these communities?
I'm not talking about these communities. I'm talking about the state actors.
Right.
So in this case, Russia. We had the first instance in 2007 where the U.S. government specifically said that Estonia was the first victim of cyber warfare. And there was a 1 month long attack against Estonia affecting its institutions that was used through the internet. We saw an attack the following year in 2008 against Georgia. More recently, we've seen attacks against Ukraine. And the U.S. government is preparing more of its defense strategy around cyber warfare. And we're going to see more and more of this. We saw this with the attacks on Sony. We see this with blackmail going on with information that's pirated. So you're going to see it on corporate level. We're going to see it on the state level. And there's
that stuff is top down. But what Rahaf is describing seems a little more nebulous, doesn't it? This sort of these like-minded people who gather on communities and are churning out the same message.
I think there are individuals as well. I mean, I'm just talking about state actors, but there's also individuals that are very capable and that work in coordination either with state actors or are hired third parties which provide information. But the damage that has been done and will be done in the future is going to be much more serious is already amazing. We were talking about crippling countries. So much of our infrastructure
that is state sponsored.
That is state sponsored.
Okay, we're going to pick up on that when we come back.
Sure.
Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.